Hello, Mr. Cove here, today with a Diablo 4 video. The new season is coming out next week, and I kind of wanted to talk about Diablo 4 and these other ARPGs that probably a lot of us have been playing for the past few years. Um, so first of all, on paper, since D4 has come out, I've considered it inferior to the other big ARPGs. PoE 1, now PoE 2, and even last Epoch. But the reality is that I've lasted longer in almost every D4 season compared to seasons for these other games. And I could never really reconcile why that was. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about that for the past 2 years because I feel like I've been unfair to Diablo 4. If it's an inferior game and, simple and, just not as good as these other games, so why do you play it for, 3, 4 weeks into a season while, you may only last a week into some of these other games, right? And so instead of just comparing the systems and, the fact that it's more complicated and PoE's had a dozen years to have, all kinds of things in their end game, I'll say that PoE 2 doesn't have that yet, but even last Epoch feels like there's more of a progression as far as getting to the end, right? We have these uber bosses that you can do at the end now, whereas Diablo 4, almost anybody with any build can kind of finish, with the biggest boss of whatever the season is, Belial, Duriel before that. And so you have this feeling of, okay, I've done the things. It didn't take very long. What do I do now, right? So I've thought about that, and on paper, again, these other games just do it better. So I kind of wanted to go over why is it that I play this longer? Why is D4 keep my attention longer when that doesn't really make sense when I think about it? So the first thing I think is the ability to skip the campaign. Um, this is a big deal, and we'll come back to this later. But when you start Diablo 4 compared to these other games, what is the first thing that you do if you've chosen the skip campaign, which I would suggest doing? You have someone in town leading you to a new quest line. So you're already doing something you didn't do in last season compared to all these other games where you have to go through 10 acts. And although PoE has done a much better job of this recently with making their new content something to engage with early, and I believe Last Epoch does a good job with that too. Nemesis last season was certainly something you wanted to engage with early. The Merchant PoE season, Mercenaries last season, although it was rippy and that's kind of been a thing for them for forever. Still, they've made a point of like, we want people to be incentivized to do this stuff while they're going through the campaign and not just wait till end game. So although they've done a better job of making their new content available early, Diablo 4, you're kind of dumped into the new content immediately. So it just feels more different from season to season compared to these other games. And that sounds ironic talking about it because everyone complains about how, D4 just regurgitates the same thing every season. We have powers and, but in practice, you're not doing the campaign for the 100th time and you are actually doing something different. So, for example, you have a quest line, and I'm not saying like the quest line is super interesting. I don't really pay attention to what they're saying for the most part, but you are doing different things and you're engaging in new content in a few different ways almost immediately. So you have malignant tunnels, you have vaults, you have new whisper areas, and usually you also have new powers that you're using, which so far have usually been dominant early and then kind of taper off to be just kind of what they like to call icing for your builds later. But early on, these powers are usually very powerful and can be focused on, right? So when you're playing Diablo 4 for, the first few hours, it always feels different than the last season. You're not doing the campaign over. You're not, just running into a new mine once a area in a PoE map, but still doing the same campaign that you've been doing for 10 years, right? So it actually is quite a bit different. And I think that's a big difference when I'm playing to start off here. Also, again, I feel like Diablo 4 gets a bad rep for this, but the uniques that they add and change, they do feel like they change your build more than some of these other games. Where with PoE, I can feel like almost everything's the same until I kind of get to the end game, other than, some of the new content that's in a map or whatever. But that isn't super meaningful until end game. And then at the end of the game for PoE, you can, choose to do Blight or, whatever it is, right? There's so many different in-game paths you can take that's not just mapping, that you can kind of enjoy and make the experience feel different season to season, right? And a lot of people just enjoy doing the same types of things to get currency and whatever, but if you want to, you can have a completely different experience in PoE at the end of doing the campaign. But you do have to go through the campaign, and that's going to feel similar up to that point, right? And now PoE 2 has made that even worse because now it takes much longer to get through the campaign compared to these other games. So, when you're making a character and it's new, at least in Diablo, once you get like a new unique that they put out or whatever, that's going to actually make the build feel different, and you can play a completely different build than what you've played previously with whatever class. Usually every class has something different that does significantly change how they play. So, while they add a lot of these other things with the other games, it's usually not until you get to the very end where you might feel that impact. Whereas with Diablo, you're experiencing that new stuff almost from the very beginning. And now as far as the no campaign goes, I think I probably play these games a bit differently. Some people play one character and just get to the very end, see how powerful you can get till you get bored. Maybe set some goals in mind. I want to get to this boss, or I want to complete challenges. I want to get to level whatever, and that can vary depending on the game, right? So in Diablo, you're almost guaranteed to get to the end, essentially, unless you're playing like a really underpowered build or just don't know what you're doing. You're going to be able to get to tier 4. You're going to be able to, kill all the bosses and do all the things if you have a semi-competent build. So what I like doing, and usually, again, there's new uniques and stuff that's available for each class. I usually play each class in a Diablo season. And when I'm thinking about making a new character, that doesn't feel like I'm going to have to go through 10 acts again, or, play through 20 to 30 hours in a PoE 2 campaign. I don't have to do that. Not only do I get to skip the campaign, but I can use whisper caches to get my character up, fairly easy to like level 40 or 50 if I want, and then get to level 60 in, an hour or something, right? So the idea of playing alts, I think, in D4 is just so much better compared to these other games. And I think the way I play these games and really do enjoy playing alts, that caters to me. So I don't think that's going to fit with everyone. So if someone's just playing one character every season and trying to get them super powerful, I think it would make sense to maybe prefer some of these other games where there's just more to do in the end game, and able to take your character to higher heights, and it takes more time to get to that point. Whereas if you like alts, Diablo 4 makes that very easy. And now with shared Paragon, a lot of times the powers are shared as well, so you don't have to level those back up. And then again, with the whisper caches that you can just stick in your stash and level up to, 40, 50, whatever you want when you do that. So I do think that it took me a while to kind of realize why I not preferred D4. I do have fun in these other games, but just why I played it more, why I lasted longer in a season. when, I would think and talk about it, it'd just be like, well, this game is just not as good as these other games. So why am I playing it for 4 weeks and I can only, handle a week for PoE or Last Epoch or something? So uh, there is one last difference. I also think that, and I get this is probably specific to me again because I prefer playing SSF. So especially in PoE, since Last Epoch does have a good SSF system, but still, once you get your character pretty powerful, the upgrades and the feeling of progression can slow down considerably with both of those games fairly early, in the mapping and, or echoes with Last Epoch. And with Diablo, I don't know, with the Paragon, with glyphs, it feels like getting items is more likely that are upgrades to with having masterworking. It feels like you have all these different little power things that really just require some time. So if you play for a couple hours in a night, like you can pretty much guarantee that your character got more powerful, and probably by a somewhat noticeable margin. Whereas these other games, if you got a couple levels in Last Epoch, or maybe even a couple of levels in PoE, but you didn't get a new item to drop that was better. Again, this is more SSF specific because I do think the progression with PoE playing Trade League, and that's really how the game's meant to be played, that's a little different because you can be like, hey, I got 5 divines, I got 100 chaos, whatever it is, and feel like you've made progression because you're working towards being able to, afford equipment that would upgrade your character, right? So that may and probably is the biggest problem with me playing PoE is just playing SSF. The it could be random as far as whether or not you get upgrades, and that towards, when you get into the 90s and stuff with level. I do think this was better in Last Epoch. It lasted quite a bit longer this past season. I do think what they've added is continued to make the end game feel better, and there's enough different things that I didn't get bored really. Really just kind of stopped because Path of Exile 2 had their patch come out and tried that. So it wasn't really even really an endpoint for me in Last Epoch this past season where I was like, all right, I've had enough, and that'll be it for the season. So just curious if you Diablo 4 fans, are these kind of things the thing that make you play Diablo 4 longer? Is it more of the simplicity? Is it the combat? Is it the feel? Is it the graphics? For me, it's really the progression and ease of alts, I think. And again, just right when I start the game, I'm not having to look at the campaign again. I'm getting to go do something new. Even if it's a simple quest line, there's usually a new type of dungeon, new sets of whispers. It's tangibly different compared to running the campaign yet again in Path of Exile or Last Epoch. So it took me a while to kind of come to grips with why I played Diablo 4 longer than these other games. But I think that's pretty much it, what I've listed. So very curious if other people feel the same way, or, I'm sure just the PoE people who hate Diablo 4 and haven't played it for a couple of years will disagree with all that. But for the rest of you that are still playing D4, like, what is it about it compared to these other games that keeps you interested? Very curious. All right, that's about it. Thanks for listening, and catch you guys next time.